This podcast is brought to you by Free Buddhist Audio, the Dharma for your life. Our work is funded entirely by donations from our generous listeners. If you would like to help us keep this free, make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. Thank you, and happy listening.
Padmasagara just evoked the importance of talks, the importance of giving Dharma talks throughout the ages. I want to take us back at the start of this Dharma talk to before any Dharma talk had been given. So going right back to the beginning, right back to the Buddha Shakyamuni, right back to the time at Bodh Gaya where the Buddha has gained enlightenment. So no communication yet of the Dharma, just the Buddha sitting perhaps beneath the Bodhi tree, or at least in the area of the Bodhi tree, after having had this tremendous liberating vision, this tremendous process going on for the Buddha. And he's yet to communicate that, obviously. He's just dwelling in the bliss of liberation. He's just feeding on the bliss of his liberation. Liberation and the bliss of it is the Buddha's nourishment. So he's there at Bodh Gaya, thoroughly enjoying that process. And at some point, the Buddha starts to reflect on the insight that he's gained. He begins to reflect on the process that's been going on for him. And whether he says this aloud, or whether it's thoughts, words that flash upon his enlightened consciousness, we don't know. But the early Pali texts tell us that certain words occurred to the Buddha. And in translation, these words are, "This Dhamma that I have attained is profound, hard to see and hard to understand, peaceful and sublime, unattainable by mere reasoning, subtle, to be experienced by the wise." So this is the Buddha reflecting on his own awakening, his own enlightenment. And these are the words of the Buddha himself. He's telling a group of monks, this is in the Ariyapariyesana sutta, about what happened to him, and not just at Bodh Gaya, but the whole process leading up to the enlightenment at Bodh Gaya, and what happened next. So he's describing here the truth that he's realised as being something profound, something subtle, but also something hard to see and hard to understand. So immediately in exploring our theme of the weekend, the Buddha's liberating vision, these words show us, they demonstrate that we've got a very difficult task ahead of us. We don't know what the Buddha saw. We don't know what the Buddha realised at Bodh Gaya. I'm assuming that nobody here is an enlightened being. So therefore, that experience, if we can even call it an experience that the Buddha had, it is a mystery to us. We don't know directly for ourselves what happened and what he saw. Whatever we've read about that, whatever we've thought about it, whatever discussions we've had about it, as helpful as all of that will have been to us, it's no substitute for a direct experience of reality for ourselves. As the Buddha says, this truth is unattainable by mere reasoning. We can't reason ourselves into enlightenment. We can't just think ourselves into enlightenment. We can't just think about enlightenment and think that that is enlightenment itself. So enlightenment is beyond all words. This is what the Buddha is saying. It's beyond all concepts, beyond mere reasoning. Enlightenment has to be a lived experience. It has to be directly experienced for ourselves. So let's just be really clear about that at the beginning. I think it's really crucial that we understand this about Buddhism. At the centre of Buddhism is a transcendental core, we could say. The heart of Buddhism is transcendental. It's beyond concepts, as I've said, it's beyond mere words. It's in no way ordinary. It's in no way mundane. It's in no way worldly. So Buddhism isn't just about relaxing. Buddhism isn't just about fixing ourselves. Buddhism isn't about impressing our friends or anything like that. Buddhism is about this transcendental core. I'm not trying to be heavy and put people off here or anything like that. I just want to make the point that, if you're engaging with Buddhism and you're finding it very helpful and it's on a particular level and you are feeling more relaxed and you are feeling more together, well, that's fantastic. That's really, really good. Keep exploring that. But do know that there's more. There's more to Buddhism than that. And if you're communicating to somebody else about Buddhism, make sure that they know that there's more to it than that as well. And that more is this transcendental dimension. The truth of Buddhism, the truth that Buddhism points to, does transcend mere reasoning, mere words and concepts, as the Buddha says in this passage. So if that's the case, how on this weekend are we going to explore the Buddha's liberating vision? If we don't know what that vision was, if we can't just talk about it and have ideas about it, how are we actually going to explore it? How am I going to give a talk about it? I think what we're going to have to do is try to catch glimpses, try to see reflections of the Buddha's vision. Look for hints, look for pointers, look for symbols that might communicate something of that vision to us. So we find these, as I said already, in the early texts, in the Pali Canon, and particularly I'm going to draw today on the Ariyapariyesana sutta. So this is the sutta on the Buddha's noble quest. And in it we find various reflections of the Buddha's vision. We find it in various forms, so conceptual formulations, we find concepts, but we also find metaphors, similes, images and visions in this text. But also we get these strange encounters, at least one strange encounter that I'll talk about today, between the Buddha and a non-human being, another worldly being. And we shouldn't reject these encounters, these evocations of deities and images. They are important to us. Okay, we can't scientifically prove that they took place, but they are communicating something to us, perhaps something deeper, something more true than we can put into concepts. So let's approach those incidents, those encounters with an open mind. And all of these different modes of expression can help to give us some appreciation of what the Buddha's liberating vision was and is. And we can ponder these images, these reflections, we can discuss them together, we can reflect on them, we can meditate on them, and hopefully start to move closer ourselves towards something of the Buddha's liberating vision. Okay. So as the Buddha said in that passage I've already quoted, it's not going to be easy for us. So the Dhamma that he realised is hard to see, hard to understand. We might even be forgiven for thinking, is it even possible? So will it even be possible for us to have the Buddha's liberating vision for ourselves? Will it be possible for us to partake in that? Well, the Buddha himself asked the very same question on our behalf. So after saying how profound, how subtle, how sublime his realization had been, he goes on to say, but this generation, as in this world, relies on attachment, relishes attachment, takes delight in attachment. It's hard for such a generation to see this truth, namely specific conditionality, dependent origination. If I were to teach the Dhamma, others would not understand me, and that would be wearying and troublesome for me. So lots to ponder in this passage. So already we've got a glimpse there of the Buddha's liberating vision. Did you catch the glimpse? So he expressed the truth he'd realised there in a conceptual way, an intellectual way. He said it's hard for such a generation to see this truth, namely specific conditionality, dependent origination. So specific conditionality, dependent origination, this is Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation of the Pali term pratitya samutpada, or pratitya samutpada in Sanskrit. And Sangharachita Bhante, his preferred translation of that Pali term is conditioned co-production. To keep it simple, let's condense that to one word and just speak in terms of conditionality. It does remove some of the nuances and the subtleties, but just to keep it simple, the Buddha here is talking about the truth he's realised in terms of conditionality. And we just get the word here, we just get the description. The Buddha doesn't elaborate in this particular passage on what conditionality is. But elsewhere in the Pali Canon we get a particular formula. The Buddha explaining this in a particular formula. So that formula is, you're perhaps all familiar with this, this being, that becomes. With the arising of this, that arises. This not being, that does not become. With the ceasing of this, that ceases. So this is conditionality expressed in a formulaic way. So basically, the Buddha, in looking out on the world, with the enlightened consciousness, the most striking feature that he sees about the world is that everything is conditioned. All of existence is conditioned. It arises because certain conditions are present. If those conditions are not present, a thing does not arise. And if they cease to be present, the thing also ceases to be present. So this is Buddhism in a nutshell. So if anybody asks you, what does Buddhism teach? You could say that Buddhism teaches conditionality. You'd have to unpack that for them probably, but ultimately this is what Buddhism teaches. And lots of other teachings that you'll be familiar with are actually just further elaborations of this particular principle or this particular law of conditionality. So for example, all things are impermanent. We know that that's a Buddhist teaching. That's actually, if you look at it, conditionality being expressed in a particular way. So of course things are impermanent because they arise and cease in dependence upon conditions. So if the conditions are not there, the thing will cease. Okay? So this is the Buddha, through this teaching, describing the way things are. Well, it's the closest one can get to describing the way things are in conceptual terms. The problem is, and this is what the Buddha identifies in that passage, the problem is that we don't see it like that. So we don't see that things are arising and ceasing in dependence upon conditions. We don't see that things are impermanent, and therefore we attach to them. We form attachments to them. We want them to be permanent, so we hold on to them. Or we definitely don't want the thing to be there, so we get attached to the idea of pushing things away. We think they are permanent, so we get into a battle with them. We push them and resist them. And it's all that pushing and that pulling and that inability to see reality in terms of conditioned co-production that causes us a tremendous amount of suffering, a tremendous amount of dukkha. So obviously that can be very vivid, very dramatic instances of suffering. We experience a bereavement, for example, or a serious illness, but also right down to very subtle things. We have an itch, a slight discomfort. There's somebody who we don't quite like the look of and start to feel aversive towards. All of these things are the playing out of our attachment and our inability to see things in terms of conditionality. So it's really easy to say all that, isn't it? It sounds quite straightforward, really. It's quite simple. What are we playing at? Very easy to talk about, very easy to understand intellectually, but emotionally, we just don't get it. All this runs very, very deep. All these attachments run very, very deep. So let's not kid ourselves that because we can talk about conditionality, that we know all about it and that we understand it. The Buddha elsewhere described, well, it was Ananda who said to the Buddha that he thought this was quite a straightforward insight that the Buddha had attained. And the Buddha said, no, Ananda, don't say that. This whole world, it's because of its inability to see conditionality, that it's all tangled up like a ball of grass and reeds and covered in mildew. It's because of that it's because of our inability to see this that we experience life in that way lots of the time. Later as well, Buddhist tradition develops iconography to help us to see this more clearly. So you might have all seen the Wheel of Life that's in the lobby to the shrine room out there. This is a depiction of the complexity, actually, of conditioned co-production as it's experienced by a human being, and how that continually keeps reinforcing patterns of attachment and patterns of suffering. So the Buddha, by contrast, he's seen deeply this truth. He's seen this, and he's ceased, he's dropped all attachments he's had. So that's the nature of the vision, but why is it liberating for the Buddha to have seen this truth of conditionality? It's because, this is Sangharakshita's main emphasis in terms of conditioned co-production, is that there are actually two trends. So there's a cyclic trend whereby we keep putting conditions in place that lead to further suffering, and so on, and we just keep going round and round as the Wheel of Life depicts. But the Buddha's insight is that there's also a progressive trend within conditionality. So if our suffering is conditioned, to bring it to an end, we just need to change the conditions. We need to remove the conditions that are leading to our suffering. And we can actually put conditions in place that lead away from suffering. So there's a cyclic trend that we're locked within, but there's also a progressive trend that can help to free us from that cycle of suffering. But the Buddha's asking this question, will people be able to see that? Or are they so locked into, are they so mired in attachment that they'll just never be able to see it? That's the question that is the Buddha's recounting here in the Ariyapariyesana Sutta. And he says that he wasn't actually convinced. So he said, if I were to teach the Dhamma, others would not understand me, and that would be wearying and troublesome for me. So at this point, and this is leading into a second glimpse of the Buddha's liberating vision, at this point, one of those strange encounters that I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, one of these strange encounters occurs with a non-human being. So as the Buddha is turning this question over in his mind, as he's reflecting on the nature of his vision and to some extent on the nature of the world, in the Brahma world, this is in traditional Buddhist cosmology a particular god realm, Brahma Sahampati, whose name means the Lord of 1,000 worlds, he becomes aware of the process that's unfolding in the Buddha's mind, and he exclaims, "The world will be lost. The world will be utterly lost, for the mind of the Buddha, accomplished and fully enlightened, inclines towards inaction rather than teaching the Dhamma." And at that point, Brahma Sahampati vanishes from the Brahma world and appears, manifests like a great light in front of the Buddha. And after paying homage to the Buddha, it's an interesting detail, I think, in the story. The Lord of 1,000 worlds bows down to the Buddha. He then says, "Venerable Sir, let the Blessed One teach the Dhamma. Let the Sublime One teach the Dhamma. There are beings with little dust in their eyes who are wasting through not hearing the Dhamma. There are those who will understand the Dhamma." So this is what's known as Brahma Sahampati's request. And what are we to make of it? What are we to make of this encounter between the Buddha and Brahma Sahampati? What are we to make of Brahma Sahampati himself? Do we take it literally, that a god literally appeared before the Buddha, descended as it were from the heavens and began to speak to the Buddha? Do we dismiss it as ancient superstitious nonsense that we can't scientifically verify? Or do we take it differently? Do we take this episode symbolically? Is it trying to communicate to us something through symbols? And it does present a bit of a difficulty to us, I think, this, because presumably in a traditional society where there was much less of a rigid distinction made between what was scientifically verifiable and therefore true and what was not verifiable in that way and therefore unreal, made up, fantastical, traditional societies didn't make such a distinction in that kind of way as we do. I think we can't take it literally, but we can't dismiss it either, this encounter. Perhaps the best way we can take it is symbolically. Assume that it's speaking to us on a level beyond our reason. This is not the language of concepts, this is the language of the imagination. It's the language of poetic truth, it's the language of myth, a very important language. So if we take it like that, what is it saying? What is this encounter with Brahma Sahampati saying? What is Brahma Sahampati a symbol for? Well, let's look at what he's saying. So he's saying the world will be lost. The world will be utterly lost. So it's a voice that is full of concern. It's a voice that is full of care. If you like, it's the voice of the world. It's the voice of 1,000 worlds speaking to the Buddha. It's as if all the suffering and the strife in the world is speaking to the Buddha and saying, don't leave us. Don't leave us, we need you. We'll be lost without you. If you don't communicate the Dhamma, there'll be no hope for us. There'll be nothing higher for us to aspire to. So I mentioned before conditioned existence, the attachments within conditioned existence. And that whole process, I mean, we all experience it, don't we, every day. It can at times, or quite a lot of the time, just feel so pointless and meaningless and trivial. I was just trying to think of examples of where I experienced that quite strongly, and it's usually in the most mundane of circumstances, like a supermarket queue or something like that, or a traffic jam. And it just feels so boring, so trivial and so mundane. It's like the queue's not moving and I just feel so stuck. And it makes me think, is this all there is? Is this what life is all about? Is this what millions of years of evolution have led to? Me stuck in this traffic jam or this queue and it not going anywhere. And there's all this trivia on the radio and flashing lights in the supermarket and adverts for hamburgers and all the rest of it. Is this what life is all about? I'm sure you've all experienced that, the kind of mundane, crushing ordinariness of life. And in contrast, if in those moments we can recollect the Buddha, something else just breaks in, doesn't it? It's like a beam of light just breaks into that ordinariness and that triviality and that drudgery. It's like there is something beyond it. And when we can do that, it actually makes traffic jams okay, even quite pleasant at times. And that's what the Buddha represents. So imagine that wasn't there in your experience at all. Imagine the complete absence of that, not just for you, but for the entire world. What would that be like? And that's what Brahma Sahampati is pleading for. He's saying, don't leave us to that. Don't leave the world only to traffic jams and supermarket queues and flashing lights and trivia on the radio. Give us something more. Give us something more than that. Give us something to actually aspire to. Give us something higher. So Bhante Sangharakshita's interpretation of this encounter with Brahma Sahampati, he also makes the point that we can see this as something, as a process that's unfolding within the mind of the Buddha, within the mind of enlightenment itself. This dialogue is playing out within the mind of the Buddha, in the depths of his enlightened consciousness. This is very interesting. This is where we're getting another glimpse, a second glimpse of the Buddha's liberating vision. Often we can think of enlightenment as something static. It's the end point. It's what we're aiming for. It's where we get to. And when that comes, we just kind of sit down, put our feet up, and enjoy the bliss of liberation. And there will be, I'm sure, an element of that. But it's not the end of the story. So in a lecture given many years ago, some of you were perhaps there, Sangharakshita, the lecture was the discerning Buddha. Sangharakshita talked about another sutta in which Brahma Sahampati appears actually, and that was the Gaurava Sutta. And he talks in that lecture about the spiral path, about the spiral type of conditionality. And he asks the question, why do formulas of the spiral path stop at a particular point? Is it because enlightenment is a static state that is just a stopping? And he makes the point that, well, no, it's not like that. It can't possibly be like that. Obviously, we have to give an end point, because otherwise we'd just have to carry on talking. He makes the point enlightenment is continually unfolding into greater and greater, richer and richer states. There's no end to what you can describe about it in terms of its depth and its profundity. So this is a second glimpse, isn't it? The Buddha's, if Brahma Sahampati in this dialogue is taking place within the enlightened consciousness, it shows us that enlightenment unfolds. It shows us that enlightenment is dynamic. It's not static. It's not just an ending. It continually unfolds. It's continually creative. It's a continually creative dimension of consciousness. So another way we talk about this is that the Buddha experienced, if we can call it an experience, a spiritual rebirth. So the enlightenment is not the end of a process. In one sense it is, but it's the beginning of something completely new, a new kind of consciousness. In another lecture, Sangharakshita refers to the Buddha as the new man, because he's got this completely new kind of consciousness. So perhaps this encounter with Brahma Sahampati gives us that glimpse that enlightenment is not static, it's dynamic, it's continually unfolding, continually creative. So then, immediately after Brahma Sahampati has made his request, after he's pleaded with the Buddha to teach, we immediately get then a third insight into the vision of the Buddha. We get a third insight or reflection of how the Buddha sees the world. So we're told that after hearing Brahma's request, the Buddha looked out upon the world, looked out on the world with his Buddha eye, with the eye of the enlightened consciousness, the enlightened imagination, and he has a great vision then of the world of living beings. He sees that the world of living beings resembles a great lake full of lotuses. So lotuses grow out of swampy, dark, thick, sludgy water. Some of them are buried deep in the muck. Others are pushing their way up through that dirty, viscous water. Others have actually penetrated to the surface, come out of the water. And others are standing completely clear of the water altogether and are ready to come into bloom. And the Buddha sees that people are just like that. So within the swamp, if you like, of conditioned existence, within the muck of dukkha and of suffering, some people are buried deep down in that. Others are pushing their way up through that. Others are starting to come into bloom. the Buddha sees that people are like this, that everybody actually has the potential to grow. Everybody has the potential to bloom and to flourish. So what we get here is an insight into the fact that the Buddha's vision is a compassionate vision. And we have to be careful using the language of compassion, don't we? Because it can so easily tip into something sentimental. We can think of the Buddha having pity for people, dispensing charity to people from on high and from an aloof position. But this image suggests it isn't like that at all. It's not that the Buddha feels himself to be separate from others and therefore able to dispense compassion upon others in that kind of way. It's more that the Buddha feels fully identified with other people, with the potential in all other people. So the Buddha knows that what he's attained, what he's experienced, is in every other person, wherever they might be in terms of their growth and their spiritual evolution. They've all got the same potential that he has. So he feels very closely, very resonantly with the potential in all other beings. The Pali word that's translated as compassion often is anukampa. And that literally does mean trembling with or shaking with. So the Buddha is in communication, in relationship to people in that kind of way, with that kind of closeness, sees the sameness of self and others in terms of that potential for enlightenment. And incidentally, just as an aside, that's how we're trying to see people ourselves when we do the metta bhavana, for example. We're not seeing other people in terms of our likes and our dislikes. We're trying to connect with them on a deeper level, connect with them in terms of their potential for growth, their potential for enlightenment, and wishing that for them. So we're seeing here how the Buddha's vision, it's not just liberating for him, it's a vision of liberation. It's a vision of the potential liberation of all living beings. And again, Bhante has made the strong point that there's no such thing as a private liberation. There's no such thing as private and personal enlightenment. If it's all about one's own experience of bliss, it's not enlightenment. It has to have that other regarding element to it. And we get a sense here that the Buddha's vision definitely included that element. So having looked out on the world, having seen the world of living beings in this way, next the Buddha makes an exclamation. He makes what's known as a lion's roar. So the lion is the king of the jungle. When the lion roars, all the other animals fall silent. And the Buddha is the king of beings, the highest, the most realized of beings. So he lets out this lion's roar. He says, "Wide open are the doors of the deathless. Let those who have ears release their faith." So having seen beings in the way that he has, he knows he will go forth and teach. And he's saying, wide open are the doors of the deathless. Let those who have ears release their faith. So again, we're getting a fourth glimpse here of the Buddha's enlightenment, described in this curious term, the deathless. The deathless, what does that mean? Well, if we take death first, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, we've all been touched with in some way or another, it's a highly charged area for us, death, isn't it? We know, at least intellectually, that we will die. Whether we know it on a deeper level or not is another question, but at least intellectually we'll all agree that one day we will die. We don't know when. So the timing of death is uncertain, and we don't know what death will feel like. We don't know what will unfold at the time of death. We don't know what will happen after death. if we're honest with ourselves, any ideas we've got about what will happen after death are just ideas. We don't know. Death is a mystery for us, but it's definitely something that one day we will encounter. So understandably, we can have a lot of fears around death, whether that's the prospect of our own death or the prospect of the death of others that we love and are dear to us. We can have a lot of fear around that. So the idea of something that is deathless, the whole notion of deathlessness, well, that's very attractive, isn't it? It's important to realize that what the Buddha's not promising here, if you like, what the Buddha's not describing is some kind of prolongation of physical life in the way that we currently know it and experience it. It's not the rebirth in some literally existing physical heaven somewhere else. It's something much more profound and subtle than that. So what does it mean? What is the deathless? Well, when I was reflecting on this notion of the deathless, what came to mind were some verses from a sadhana, so from a visualization practice, a meditation practice on a particular Buddha and Bodhisattva. These are known as sadhanas. And this particular sadhana is on the Bodhisattva Vajrasattva. So if you come on the shrine tour this afternoon, you'll hear a lot more about all the images here, but Vajrasattva included. And this particular sadhana is known as the confounder of hell sadhana. And there are some particular verses within that sadhana, and one of them goes like this. E Mao, Dhamma wondrous strange, profoundest mystery of the perfect ones. Within the ceaseless, all things cease to be. Yet in that ceasing, nothing ceases. So I'll repeat that. E Mao, Dhamma wondrous strange, profoundest mystery of the perfect ones. Within the ceaseless, we could say deathless, all things cease to be. Yet in that ceasing, nothing ceases. So that's mind-boggling, isn't it? Paradoxical. Definitely not to be understood rationally. But let's try to say a little bit more. Let's try to get a little bit closer to what these verses might mean, which will help us to get a sense of the deathless. So the verse is saying that within the deathless, if you like, all things die, even though it's deathless. But in that dying, nothing dies. So what on earth can this possibly mean? Well, let's go back to that first glimpse of the Buddha's vision. Let's go back to his insight into existence in terms of conditionality. So I said earlier that all things arise and cease in dependence upon conditions. That's why they're impermanent, but we can take that a little bit further than previously. So yes, things arise in dependence upon conditions. So things arise when certain conditions are present. But if that's the case, can we say that the thing that has arisen or ceases, can we say that it's actually a thing in its own right, independent of its conditions? Or is it so intertwined with those conditions, given that they're what give rise to it, that we can't speak of it as being independently existing? So this is the Buddhist truth of insubstantiality, the Buddha's description of reality in terms of insubstantiality. Nothing exists independently of other things. It exists only because conditions have allowed it to arise. And that's not all, is it? Because all of those conditions that have given rise to a specific thing, well, they're not things either. So all those conditions have arisen because of other conditions, and so on and so on and so on. And as Buddhist tradition develops, the Mahayana tradition in particular really goes to town with this. It says that all things have to be spoken of in that way. All things are actually shunya, empty. Shunyata, emptiness. This is the vision. This is another way of talking about the Buddha's liberating vision. So emptiness. But that doesn't mean nothing. That doesn't mean nothing exists, because things are constantly arising and passing away. It's just there's this constant flow of phenomena, this constant play, this constant appearance of things arising and passing away. We could just as much talk about it as fullness as of emptiness. Another way shunyata has been translated is as an open dimension of being. So if we think about, because we can only do that, reflect on the Buddha's vision in this way, in terms of shunyata, our distinctions, our notions of this as opposed to that, our distinctions of death as opposed to life or as opposed to birth, they begin to break down. And maybe then we start to enter into this mystery that the Buddha is describing in this particular sutta that we're looking at in terms of the deathless. And that is wondrous, that is strange, as these verses are saying. So I think with this, this is the fourth glimpse, isn't it? This is the fourth reflection we've had of the Buddha's liberating vision, the deathless. We're getting a reminder here of the profundity and the subtlety of the Buddha's liberating vision. It's a reminder not to get caught up in words, not to get caught up in concepts and think that we know what the Buddha's liberating vision is. So yes, we can describe the Buddha's vision conceptually in terms of conditionality. Yes, we can speak of his vision as unfolding, as deepening, as dynamic and creative. Yes, we can speak of it as a compassionate vision, a vision that responds with and resonates with the potential in all others for enlightenment. But ultimately, these are ways of speaking. These are ways of evoking whatever the vision truly was. And that's still a mystery to us. The deathless, as the fourth way of talking, this reminds us of that. It throws us back to some extent into the mystery. And it reminds us that if we want to develop this vision for ourselves, the words are not enough. The concepts are not enough. We have to live this vision. We have to find out how to live this vision. We have to become the Buddha's liberating vision. We have to embody it. That's the way we will understand the Buddha's liberating vision. But of course that throws up a massive question that I can't possibly hope to answer in the rest of the talk, and that we might not, well, let's hope we don't fully answer it on this weekend, because it's a lifetime's work, hopefully. So that question is, well, how do we do that? How do we realize the Buddha's liberating vision for ourselves? So the whole of Buddhism, in a way, is an answer to that question. The whole history of Buddhism is a way of trying to find an answer to that question. How do we approach the Buddha's vision for ourselves? Well, I'm just going to draw out something that it's not just that I think is essential, the Buddha seems to be saying is essential in the Ariyapariyesana Sutta when he's describing the events at Bodh Gaya, when he's describing that interaction with Brahma Sahampati. So in that last quote, the Buddha said, "Wide open are the doors to the deathless. Let those who have ears release their faith." Let those who have ears release their faith. I think that is the key for us. There's something essential in that is really key for us. So we're halfway there already because we've all got ears. Even if they're not working particularly well, we've all got senses. Yeah? We can hear, we can see, we can read, we can touch, and all these things will help us to develop the Buddha's liberating vision. So what's left for us to do is to release our faith. Release your faith, the Buddha says. So sometimes people are surprised to find an emphasis on faith in Buddhism, because Buddhism is often presented as and often taken as being something that is rational, philosophical, and it is rational and philosophical, but it's more than that. Buddhism is more than just a philosophy, more than just a way of thinking about reality or talking about reality. If we take it purely in rational and philosophical terms, what we do is we confuse faith with belief. So we see faith as the opposite of reason. We see faith as something irrational and something of a hindrance to us. But in Buddhism, faith is not the same as belief. So faith is a translation of shraddha, the Sanskrit term shraddha. And that comes from the verb to place the heart upon. So it's to do then with the heart, with the emotions, with the whole emotional side of spiritual life. And that's so key. If we want to live a spiritual life, the emotions have to be engaged. Sangharakshita said the central problem for most people is to find emotional equivalence to their intellectual understanding of the Dhamma. That will be the work for most people. So faith is not contrary to reason, it's the emotional counterpart to our reason. If you like, it's our emotional responsiveness to the truth, whether that's expressed in conceptual terms or in some other terms. Faith is the emotional response that we have to them. And specifically in Buddhism, faith is about responsiveness to the Buddha. Responsiveness to the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha, but of course the Dharma comes from the Buddha, the Sangha comes from the Buddha, so ultimately Shraddha is about responsiveness to the Buddha. Another way of talking about it would be that it's the responsiveness of our own potential for enlightenment to the potential fully realized, enlightenment fully realized in the person of the Buddha. And Bhante Sangharakshita, he said that perhaps the best definition for what faith is the ultimate in us responding to what is ultimate in the universe. So again, that's quite mysterious, isn't it, and hard to define. But you all know what I'm talking about. You all know what I'm talking about because you've all responded emotionally already. You wouldn't be here if that was the case. You wouldn't be sat in a shrine room full of images and Buddhas and Bodhisattvas if you hadn't had some kind of emotional response to the three jewels. Now in the text, in the Ariyapariyesana Sutta, as the Buddha's describing what happened at Bodh Gaya, he says, release your faith. But there's some ambiguity there that has been picked up in the commentaries on this sutta and by different translators. So some will translate release your faith in terms of letting go of wrong faith. So stopping responding to things of lower value. They will say that that's what this particular phrase means. Others will translate it more positively and say that it means release your faith in terms of your responsiveness to the Buddha, responsiveness to higher value. And then some translators, they think the ambiguity is deliberate. They think actually it should be kept. Release your faith is a translation that keeps that ambiguity. And I think this is probably the best and most helpful interpretation for us. So we can take it as meaning drop having faith in the things that are making us suffer and release our faith positively in the direction of the things that will allow us to experience liberation. So the emphasis here is on a transition, isn't it? On a shift away from relying on attachments, relishing in attachments, delighting in attachments, as the Buddha described it, and towards cultivating for ourselves the vision of the Buddha. So I think we can ask ourselves, and maybe this is something to take into the groups, we can ask ourselves, well, what is it that's holding us back from releasing our faith positively? What is it that is keeping us on the wheel of life? What are we attached to? What do we put faith in that can't possibly satisfy us? It's not easy to see that, is it? But through discussion, we can begin to untangle that tangled mess that the Buddha talked about. And at the same time, not just what's holding us back and what do we put faith in that is unhelpful for us, but positively, what is it that we're responding to? What is it about the Buddha's vision that inspires us? What is it that moves us? What is it that lifts us? What is it that I've said in the talk that has sparked you off somehow? Is it the notion of the Buddha's liberating vision as being something very conceptually clear? Is it the Buddha's teaching on conditionality? Is it the notion of the Buddha's vision as being something continually unfolding, dynamic, creative? Does that inspire you? Is it the compassionate aspect of the Buddha's vision? Is it that really moves you? Is it the mystery of the deathless that sparks you off, that moves you, that makes you want to live a Buddhist life and experience the Buddha's vision for yourself? So find out what it is that moves you, that excites you, that sparks you off, and dwell upon that. Let that speak to you. Let that speak to you because it's like the voice of a God. It's like the voice of Brahma Sahampati in you. It's telling you you're wasting through not hearing the Dhamma. It's telling you there are those with little dust in their eyes, and you're one of them. It's telling you that you can understand, you can do this, and you can live this life. Listen to that voice. The Buddha has thrown open the doors of the deathless. He has communicated the Dhamma, and we can enter into that deathless state. So to the extent that you've heard that voice, you've got to respond to it. You've got to respond to it, whether that's with us, whether that's with Tri Ratna, whether that's within the context of Buddhism, whether that's in a different context altogether. You have to respond to that call if you've heard it. You have to fulfill your potential. You have to realize your human potential. It's a precious opportunity that you've got, this human life, to do that. So don't let it go to waste. Listen to that voice. Find a context. Find a path that will allow you to do that. Don't sink back into the muck of the swamp. You've already emerged somewhat from that. So open your ears. Release your faith. I said last night that you have a precept for the weekend, which is to be as much as you can in the presence of the Buddha, to feel yourself in the presence of the Buddha. Well, this takes it further. This is another precept, another instruction from the Buddha himself. Open your ears, release your faith. It's a precept for the weekend. It's a precept for beyond that. It's a precept for developing for yourself and for the benefit of all others the Buddha's liberating vision. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. Please help us keep this free. Make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. And thank you.